Hello and welcome back to What's Mili Making, where I am Mili and I talk about my knits of the past, present, and future. Today is Knitting Podcast episode number 2. As I haven't recorded a podcast in quite a few months, I'm not going to focus on everything from those few months because I think that would just be too overwhelming. Rather, I'm just going to talk about the things from the past month-ish. So I'll start off with my finished objects, then move on to talking about what's on my needles, and lastly, I'll talk a little bit about my ongoing no-buy / my singular acquisition of the month and what I hope to cast on with it soon. So without further ado, let's start off with my finished objects. Similar to my last video, if you see me looking down, it's because I'm looking at my notes because I will be rambly, but without the notes, I'm even ramblier or more rambly. So this is the Cloud Sweater by Petite Knit. It is a drop shoulder sweater pattern, all stockinette, pretty basic. I think the design highlights of this are it kind of mimics a raw hem or like an unfinished edge, but you actually do have some ribbing before you bind off. So it looks like an unfinished hem, but it lays a little bit nicer in my opinion. You also get these pearl ridge details along the shoulder line. Overall, this was just a very easy standard knit and I would absolutely knit it again. My one struggle was with the bind off initially because you knit some ribbing and then you knit some stockinette and then you bind off in stockinette. I find that a classic bind off, just like knitting off in pattern with stockinette, is not that stretchy, and I definitely wanted the bottom of the sweater to be stretchy because I don't like when sweaters cinch in on the bottom. So initially I had done a bind off kind of like a play on Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off where you add yarn overs in between each stitch, but it just caused the bind off to kind of flare out on the bottom and I didn't like how it looked. So as painful as it is to unpick a bind off, and I had actually woven in the ends, like unpick all of that with Suri, I did it. And I looked through other people's project pages on Ravelry and I found the Icelandic bind off, which first of all, I think looked really nice because someone said that it mimics kind of the pearl ridges that you get on the shoulders, and I totally agree. And number two, it's really easy. Once you do like the first maybe like 2 or 3, I didn't have to watch the video anymore, and I've never done the Icelandic bind off before, and it's sufficiently stretchy without flaring out. So I blocked it before I did the ribbing, and then so there is a little bit of like bulging happening right now, but I think once I blocked the whole thing out, it will be completely fine. So Cloud Sweater, only real modification was doing the Icelandic bind off. Oh, and I think I knit one last row of stockinette after the ribbing because I didn't want it to flip up as much. I also did size up my needles with this project. I knit this primarily with 5mm needles, and I'm pretty sure Petite Knit recommends 4.5mm needles with this project, and she uses a blown yarn, whereas I used a combination of sport weight yarn and Suri. The sport weight yarn I used is the Isager Tweed, so they have an Aran Tweed and then they just have Tweed, and I used just Tweed. And the denim blue color, which is like I wouldn't go as far as to call it a navy. I guess it's like the color of a medium darkish pair of jeans. And then the Suri I used is a hand-dyed Suri from Explore Knits and Fibers in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park colorway. It is a variegated yarn. So I personally love the look of variegated yarns, but often struggle with how to actually use them in garments because I don't love the look of heavily variegated garments. Technically a marled fabric, which is why I don't think it looks as variegated as a traditionally like variegated yarn garment, and I really like the effect. You can see some of like the darker blue, but then you also get all the different colors from the Suri, and I would 100% do another color combination like this because I think it just makes the variegated yarn more wearable for me. A lot of times with Suri, because it is fluffier than mohair, especially the thicker Suris that I think this has like a 328 yard yardage. With those saris, a lot of times the wool can get a little bit lost because the sari is so fluffy. But because I used that darker color of wool, I do think you see it more in the marled fabric. And oh, another thing I really liked about this, I didn't use a lot of yarn. So I initially had 4 balls of the sari and I used less than 3. Yeah, I used less than 3 because I have a whole unwound skein and then I have leftovers from the skein I was using, and I also have a full skein of the wool left. I used only 400. Long story short, I used less than 1,000 yards each of the wool and the sari, which is really nice to know that I can knit a sweater with 3 balls of sari. I actually do have like 1 or 2 sari quantities where I only bought 3 skeins thinking I would knit a lento sweater. I've never actually got around to knitting the lento, but everybody recommends the lento. But I prefer drop shoulders over raglan. So I think with those three skeins of sari sweater quantities that I have, I will just knit another cloud sweater or 2. Oh, I just remembered another modification I did is I definitely picked up way less stitches for the sleeves. Are like a little bit tight, not uncomfortably tight, but you can see how much positive ease the sleeve has that I'm wearing, and this is definitely more form-fitting, but I also think when I block it, it will grow a little bit. So I'm not really concerned about that. My second finished object is another sari project. This sweater is the light loop high neck by Other Loops, and this is knit purely in sari with 2 strands of sari, and it is a rather sheer fabric because it is knit on 7mm needles, except the neckline is knit I think with like 3.5mm needles, so the neckline is definitely less see-through. So the sari that I'm using for this project is from Woolberry Fiber Co, and this is from their Winter Sweater Society box. So this Sweater Society box is basically you can pick the base and the number of skeins that you want, and it's a surprise colorway. It comes with like some other little goodies. There was a needle stopper, there's a tag, there's some wool wash. I think that, oh, there's a mug and there's a hot cocoa bomb for the winter box, and this was the colorway. Oh, and also when they put out the boxes for the pre-order, they usually put up some inspo images for the colorways, and I really liked the inspo image for the winter box, and that's what I got. Woolberry sari, I think they changed their sari like halfway through last year. It used to be the same yardage as Explore Knits and Fibers, 328 yards, but they changed to a sari that I think has a higher silk content. So the strand is thinner, but you get more yardage. I want to say like 437 yards. So basically like over 100 more yards with that sari, which I really like. I think even if I had used the thicker sari for this sweater, how double it would still be a light sheer fabric, which is fine. That's kind of why I wanted to knit it, because I do like the airiness you get from it, and I think this will just be like a really nice spring layering piece. Oh, I really liked the construction of the sweater. It's really interesting. So looking at it, it looks like a traditional drop shoulder sweater, but with drop shoulder you are often picking up stitches and you have a lot of weaves, a lot of ends to weave in, and because this fabric is so sheer, wherever you weave in the ends, there's going to be some sort of visibility with it. So I think the designer did a really good job of making this. So basically you cast on for the neck, and then you do some short row shaping, and then you knit the back and you knit the front, all without cutting the yarn. I think maybe you cut the yarn just like at the underarms, but there's no picking up stitches along the shoulder line, I don't think. Well, I'm looking at it. Yeah, there's no picking up stitches at the shoulder line. So I think that's just really clever construction. You can see there are some ends I have to weave in along the top of the sleeves, and where I had to join new skeins, but that's about it. And this sweater got so much better after I blocked it. Before blocking, I had that same problem where since I was binding off its stockinette, it was cinching together a little bit on the bottom, and it was like kind of the opposite of the look that I was going for. I had actually done a little bit of a split hem at the bottom just to open it up a little bit, but that hadn't been good enough before I blocked it. But then after I blocked it, it just got so much looser and airier, and now it is the perfect layering piece. Oh, I also really like that it's really thin. Because it's really thin, it's also very compact, so I could easily just like throw it in my bag if I wanted to take something light to layer over. Like, let's say I'm wearing a dress and then it'll be cooler at night, I could just have this in my bag ready to go instead of taking a shawl, because I am not a big shawl person. I really like the way they look, but they're not the easiest things to wear, and this is definitely thinner than a cardigan, but maybe I should knit a Suri cardigan. I do have one other finished object, that is garment, and I literally just finished it yesterday. This is the Grit Slipover by Suri Yamamuro and Woolfolk. It is an oversized vest, and I haven't woven in any of the ends. I haven't woven in the ends in any of these finished garments, but I do weave in the ends. This is an oversized vest, like I said. So this was done with Woolfolk yarn, and for the test knit they did gift this yarn. It is their Fleck bulky weight yarn. It is so soft. Like, it is some of the softest wool I've ever used, and I think that's kind of like their whole thing, that their whole like brand identity is using super soft merino yarn, and they do not lie. I feel like this is softer than a lot of even like superwash merinos. So this is another sweater with really interesting construction, yeah, that's the right word. As you can see on the back, it's really interesting shaping, and you have an interesting stitch pattern too. It is a slip stitch pattern, and it's so enjoyable to do because the slip stitch rows go by so easily. I'm literally just like looking forward. Like, I'll do the plain row, depending on if you're in the round or knitting flat. It's like all purls or all knit. And then when you reach the slip stitch row, I feel like it goes by in half the time. Another thing I really liked about this pattern is that you did not have to go back and add any finishing touches, because while you're knitting it, there are slip stitch edges everywhere, like along the armhole, neckline, yeah. Oh, the sides of the ribbing, there's all slip stitch edges, so it's a very clean and easy finish. It also is a pretty quick knit because it is knit on 10mm needles. Yeah, this is actually the first vest that I've ever knit, and I think it'll be, again, like a nice layering piece when it's... I don't think this will be a spring layering piece since this is bulky weight yarn, but while it's still cool outside, I will be wearing this over tees, both short and long. Oh, I also forgot to mention, this yarn has a chainette construction, and it's always so interesting to me how when you look at the yarn, like, you can physically see that it is a chainette, but then once it's knit up, you cannot tell that it is a chainette. That is the last of the garments. My next finished object is also knit with Woolfolk, but this is with the yarn I bought. This is the Harriet Bonnet by... This pattern is by Milena Juhola, and it's actually the second one that I've knit this year. I knit another one as a gift knit for a friend, and I just enjoyed the pattern so much and thought it was really cute that I wanted to knit one for myself. Book Far, which again is actually a chainette construction, but once it's knit up, you cannot tell that it is a chainette. So my head is definitely bigger than the designer, so I had to use more yarn, and this pink yarn is another super soft yarn. It is Illimani Royal Alpaca in the pink colorway, and it's like 100% baby alpaca, and it's so soft. But this yarn is, the alpaca yarn is definitely prone to pilling, and I thought using it in like an accessory, or specifically a headwear accessory, would mean it'd have less opportunity for pilling, because there's less like rubbing and abrasion versus a sweater. Like, every time you move, there's opportunity for a sweater to pill. This pattern is super duper easy. I think it's very beginner friendly. I did modify it, so I added a bunch of whenever I had an edge, whenever I was knitting an edge on this, I did a slip stitch edge, but that meant I had much fewer stitches to pick up, and it basically just kind of changed the shape of it. So the bonnet is originally supposed to be like this way, and I guess like that, but I couldn't pick up as many stitches along this line because of my slip stitch edge, so I just kind of rotated it and now it fits perfectly. Definitely did knit it longer though than the pattern recommendations, and I did the same thing with the one I knit for my friend because my head is definitely bigger than the designer's and this pattern only comes in one size. The other major modification I did was to the straps. So in the pattern, I think it recommends to do a 6-stitch I-cord, but whenever I tried doing that, you could see the back of the I-cord, like it wasn't closing up and I didn't like the way it looked. So instead, I did some double knitting and then I reduced the stitches. And eventually I got to a 4-stitch I-cord, and that is the majority of the straps is a 4-stitch I-cord. I also think the double knit part of the strap is just a little bit sturdier than the I-cord. It doesn't stretch out as much, which is good. I kind of want to knit even more of these. Like I think this would be really, really cute as a scrappy project. And I also want to knit one in black and maybe blue. And it's also a really, really quick knit. Like each of these took me maybe like 2 or 3 days, and it's super warm. And also it's really easy to wear. Like when you don't want to wear it, you can just keep it tied and then keep it kind of like on the back as a hood. My last finished objects are a pair of socks, and don't look too closely because I screwed them up. This is a free pattern which has this Picot edge. You can see the Picot edge. Picot edge is really, really easy to do. It's basically just yarn overs and then you knit 2 together, kind of like in the Oslo hat. You fold it over and you knit 2 together, and where you did those yarn overs, you get the Picot edge. I think it's a really, really cute design detail, and as a bonus, you don't have to knit any ribbing because you have what is essentially a double knit fabric at the top. I screwed up is I had not knit socks in quite a few months before I knit these, and I absolutely butchered the heels on these. So in the first sock, what I did is, usually in a slip stitch heel sock, you slip every other stitch on the right side of the fabric, and then you just purl all the stitches on the wrong side of the fabric. But I slipped every other stitch on the right side and the wrong side of the fabric, and it just makes a very, very stiff and non-stretchy fabric. It's very durable, but it is not very comfortable to wear, and when I'm wearing it, I can definitely feel it. And then I realized that mistake after I finished the sock, but I was like, okay, whatever, I'm still gonna wear the sock, and I wanted the socks to be identical. So then I did the same thing on the second sock, but then I made a further mistake in that I did the gusset decreases on the top of the foot instead of the bottom of the foot, and that also made the sock uncomfortable. I did end up finishing both socks, and I did end up wearing them with the mistakes. I think at some point I will go for it and basically just maybe cut before the heel and after the and just really the reason the foot of sock. It's not really a priority right now. Maybe in the summertime when I'm not as focused on knitting sweaters, because I feel like this time of year I'm kind of like in a rush that I want to squeeze in all the sweater knitting that I can before it gets too warm to wear my sweaters. And then the yarn that I use for this is Cascade Heritage, which is a 75% merino, superwash merino, 25% nylon blend. It is a super, super soft yarn, but it's also very, very thin. And I don't think it is the sturdiest yarn. Barely worn these socks and I already see like a lot of fuzziness happening on the bottom of the foot. The bonus is it comes in a wide variety of colors, and 2, it is quite affordable for a sock yarn. I bought this at Annie & Co. Yeah, Annie & Co. in the city, New York City, and I'm pretty sure Knitty City also has a good selection of colors. If you are elsewhere in the US and you want to buy it, I would recommend going to Wool & Co., their website. They also have a ton of colors and they have free shipping. Oh, and I'm obsessed with this colorway. I really wanted red socks, which is why I bought this yarn kind of on an impulse because I was in the neighborhood. And the colorway is Christmas Red. Okay, that was all for finished objects, so let's now move on to works in progress. My first whip is the Wave Sweater by Spectral Strick. This is the right way. There she is, there she is. So this is an all over colorwork raglan sweater pattern by Spectral Strick. So this pattern was originally published in her book. Okay, I'm gonna put this down because the sound is starting to bother me. This sweater pattern was originally published in her book, and I think because of that, the pattern is very, very succinct. There's not a lot of additional information anywhere. The whole pattern, I think, is like only 2 or 3 pages. I feel like for color work, that is not a lot of information. And I did see on Ravelry quite a few people were struggling with it, and I definitely struggled with it in the beginning. There is only one chart for the whole sweater, and for me the most confusing part is that none of the increases are charted. So you have one chart for the color work, and then you just have written instructions for how to do all the increases and shaping. I actually think this is one of those sweaters that the less you think about it, the easier it is. Once you've knit the first few rows, once you basically knit maybe like, let's say, the first 2 or 3 rows of the color work, and you've set up your raglan stitches, it's really pretty much smooth sailing from then on. But getting the chart started I think is the most complicated part. And this is a bulky weight garment, bulky weight knit. The pattern suggests 4.5mm needles, but for a 16 stitch gauge, and I'm not, I used to be a much tighter knitter, but the longer I keep knitting, I think the looser my gauge gets, but I'm not at the point where I can knit color work on 4.5mm and hit a 16 stitch gauge. So I did have to size up my needles quite significantly. I think on the body it's like 6mm, and then on the sleeves it has been 6.5mm. Yes, 6.5mm. I'm a little bit stuck on Sleeve Island on the sweater. I haven't worked on it in like a week, I think, because I think the combination of small circumference knitting with color work on chunky needles just ends up giving me hand cramps quite quickly, so I don't knit on it for long stretches of time. I mean, when I do knit on it, it goes pretty fast because it's such chunky yarn on such big needles, but I don't like knitting on it often just because of the hand cramping aspect. However, I would like to get it done this month because I'd love to wear it at least a few times this winter. And because it is so bulky and it's so warm, like, look at all these floats. Look. Because it's so bulky and so warm, I think it'd be a really nice outer layer. Like if I didn't want to wear a coat, I could just wear like a long sleeve tee and then throw this on. So for my main color, I'm using a Noro yarn. It is Noro Viola. Things of yarn attached to this. So it's Noro Viola in the Kosai colorway. So it is a black, but there's all these like other colors spun into it. There's like blues and greens and reds spun into it. So it's not a flat black, and that's just the magic of Noro. For my contrast color, I am holding a single ply yarn held double. This yarn, this is Amano Skinny Yana. It's a fingering weight single ply, so I'm holding this double. This pink color, I want to say it's pink flamingo, but not 100% sure. Then I'm also holding it with some fluff. So in the body, I had been alternating the fluff because I didn't have enough of any one single colorway, and I really wanted to knit this project completely from stash yarn. Parts of it I'm using this hand-dyed Suri, which I got at the New York City Yarn Crawl in 2022 from West Village Knit and Needle. I don't remember. It was like from a local hand dyer that they have like a partnership with. Alternating it with this Amano Uma, I think this base is called. It's a really unique base. It's like a silk mohair Suri blend, and I either held the Suri held single or this one held double alongside. The wool held double. So yeah, there's a lot of yarn in this project. When I was knitting like the body and the yoke, I had, let's see, 1 strand of the Noro, 2 strands of the pink wool, 1 strand of the Suri, and then 2 strands of the
I said, oh, jump
Siri. Oh my god, Siri. I'm saying Suri, and Siri is listening. Oh, okay. Anyways, basically, when I was knitting the body of this sweater, I had 6 strands of yarn attached to it, and it was a lot. For the sleeves, I am just knitting it with the Suri, so I only have 4 strands of yarn. Much more manageable. I really like the finished object of this pattern, and I do have some other designs by this designer. I don't necessarily think it's the easiest or clearest pattern, but I'm willing to go through it for the finished object. I think I've only knit on this like once or twice within the past month. This was actually the first sweater I cast on this year. It is the Ingrid sweater by Petite knit. And the reason why I haven't been knitting on it is not because it's not enjoyable, because it's really enjoyable and I really like the fabric. The problem is I am playing a game of yarn chicken. Based on the yardages written in the pattern and the yardages that I should have enough yarn. But I've barely joined in the round for the body. I only have this much more yarn on my second ball of yarn, and I only have 4 balls total, which means I have to knit the rest of the body in 2 sleeves with 2 skeins, which is kind of been a source of stress for me. And because this wool is hand dyed and it is a semi-tonal, I have to be alternating skeins a lot, otherwise I get some very obvious pooling. In this shoulder area, I did not do a good job of alternating the skeins, and there is definitely a visible line where I switched skeins. So after that I learned my lesson, and now I'm trying to alternate skeins more frequently. So this sweater is like an all over textured knit by Petite knit, and I really love the finished object, and it's surprisingly been quite enjoyable to knit. There's a lot of double moss in it, and double moss is not my favorite stitch because if I'm not paying attention I will easily mess it up. But aside from all the double moss, I enjoy it. One possible solution I have for this is they're on the Julius sweater project page. The person from, I believe it's Tribe Yarns in the UK, they have knit a Julius sweater, except they did it with intarsia. So if you're not familiar with the Julius sweater, I will put a picture of Julius sweater and this person's project. The Julius sweater is an all over cable work sweater pattern. And what this person's modification was, they basically added like an intarsia patch of color along one side of the body and then on part of the sleeve, and it just looks really organic and really cool. And I think I'm going to try finishing up this second ball of yarn, and then, or maybe I think I'm going to do what I'm going to do. So I'm going to knit a sleeve, see how much yarn that takes, and then if I don't think I can knit the second sleeve and the rest of the body with my remaining yarn, I'm going to attempt this intarsia technique modification to see if I can get a whole sweater that way, because I really don't want to frog this, and on the other hand I don't really want to color block it either. I think this intarsia method might be what I have to do, but I'm also not very good at intarsia, but I also do want to learn intarsia this year. Big little yarn coat in their Corriedale DK base in the colorway Reikai. Silk mohair is Lang lace in the colorway, I want to say it's like lilac. They have like a purplish hue to them, but I think the wool kind of gives the final fabric a grayish color. And I realize in this lighting it's really similar to the sweater I'm currently wearing. But when you have a palette, you have a palette. What can I say? I do have other sweaters on the needles, but I haven't worked on them anytime in February, so I'm not going to talk about those. So let's move on to my accessory whips. First up, I have the Night Shift Shawl by Andrea Mari. However, I have modified this one to be a scarf. I guess the shape is kind of like the Sophie shawl, because you start off with this tapered end, and then I'm just knitting straight now, and then I'm going to start decreasing for the second end to be tapered as well. So this is kind of like, it's a semi-scrappy project because this pattern is originally written for Spin Cycle Dream State, which is their worsted weight color changing yarn, and that is what I have been using as a background for this scarf. I had 3 skeins of it in the colorway Unicorn, which is like a pink purpley kind of colorway, and I've just been using that purely for the background. And then for the contrast colors, I've just been using various scraps that I had in my stack. This is some Malabrigo worsted, this dark red. This is Suri Alpaca wool. This red is Loopy Mango Merino. This pink is Illimani Royal Alpaca, which is the same one I used in my Harriet bonnet again. The Malabrigo, and now I'm working with some La Bien-Aimée Merino DK. These are all leftovers from other projects, except this red, which I had a single skein because my brother gave it to me for as part of my Christmas gift. So as you can see, there is a pretty wide variety of gauges in this project. For my scraps, I used anything from like a DK to an Aran weight. I wasn't really picky. Learning to let go of my perfectionism, and this project is a good example of that. I did actually make a mistake. I slipped on the wrong side of the fabric, and then I was out the day that I was knitting on it, and I tried fixing it at lunch, and I just made the problem worse, and then it just caused a huge headache. And I realized that I could have just let it be because I wouldn't have even noticed that mistake while I was wearing it, but I got so caught up in it that I was like, oh my god, I have to fix it. So after that, I was like, whatever mistake I have in this scarf, unless it's like going to like change the structural integrity and integrity of the scarf, like I had dropped a stitch at some point, I'm not gonna frog. And even when I dropped the stitch, I had like unwoven it and nearby, so I just wove it into that drop stitch, and now I'm not even thinking about the drop stitch. So to modify this shawl into a scarf, I looked through other people's project pages because multiple people have done this modification before. So basically with the shawl version, you are just continuously increasing until the end of the shawl to make it a scarf. So what I had initially done is I had increased, and then when I got to the width that I liked, which is 60 stitches, I stopped increasing and I had just started knitting straight. However, as you can see, the pattern, the slip stitch pattern of the scarf is on a diagonal, and when you stop increasing and you just knit straight, the pattern is no longer on a diagonal, it sits straight across the scarf. And I really liked the way that it looks on the diagonal. So what I did, I didn't come up with this myself again, I continued increasing on this side, and then to compensate, I knit two together on this side. And then when I start decreasing, I'm going to stop increasing on this side and then continue knit two together on this side, and it will have a tapered edge on the other side of the scarf, which is in the opposite direction. So it'll be like this, I guess. I really enjoy Andrea Marie's shifty patterns. I've only knit the original night shift shawl, which I had knit in the sport weight spin circle, and I do personally prefer the look of the slip stitch pattern with a thinner yarn. I think it just looks better, but I had no plans for these scraps and this yarn, so I'm still happy with it with the thicker yarn. I still like the way it looks, and this is going to be a very wearable piece for me. And yeah, so in February I have one yarn acquisition. I bought one colorway from Nutidin's February collection. It is the colorway Stika, and it is the most beautiful like peachy creamsicle color. It's like a soft orange, so beautiful. I find with this low buy, see, this is why I did a low buy instead of a no buy, because when there's a Nutidin colorway that I really like, it's hard for me to resist it. Like, I have resisted quite a few pre-orders for yarn for like conventionally spun yarn, and it's not easy. It still takes some self-control, but I'm able to do that because I feel like, okay, I can sometimes dyers bring out the same colorways again, or I can find a commercially dyed yarn that's similar, or another dyer will come out with a similar colorway, or that same dyer will come out with a similar colorway. But because there are not a lot of companies that do unspun yarns, and Nutidin is my favorite unspun yarn, when they have a colorway that I really like that is not that similar to other colorways that I have, I can't resist. There are some colorways that I really like of theirs, but I know they're always gonna have something similar. Like, they do a lot of soft pinks, they do a lot of like brownie colors. There's always like every few months there's like some sort of white, and also like I feel like greens they do quite often. So whenever I like those colorways, sometimes I will buy it. Sometimes I'm like, okay, I already have something in my stash similar, or I know they're gonna come out with similar colorways in the future, so I'm able to resist. But now and then they come out with these really unique colorways that I cannot say no to, and that's why I have this low buy. And what I hope to knit with this, initially I was going to do the Esther jacket by Petite Knit, but then the Esther sweater is also going to be coming out. As I'm recording this, the pattern has not come out yet. Pretty sure Petite Knit said that it's coming out next week. So initially I had been planning on using this colorway for the jacket, but I feel like cardigans are more work, and I don't have any neutral colored cardigans. Even though this isn't like the most vibrant color, a peach is definitely not as neutral as like a beige or a brown or a black. I think I did buy the Esther jacket pattern. I think I will knit that in the future in some sort of brownish colorway. Like I have another Newton colorway in my stash that I had been considering, and I think I'm going to save that for the Esther jacket, which I will knit at some point in the future. And the Esther sweater, I think I will knit this colorway, and I'm going to be holding it with a strand of mohair. That mohair is MIA, but I have taken pictures of it, so I will just insert them on the screen. It is a La Bien-Aimée mohair silk in the colorway Ami's Shawl, and it's like somewhere between a variegated and a semi-tonal. It has like shades of like pink and peach in it, and it's just very ethereal and soft. The yarn combo actually reminds me a lot of the yarn combo I used for the sweater that I'm wearing right now. This sweater I also knit with one strand of Nutidin and one strand of silk mohair, and in this lighting I don't think you can get the full effect. Again, I'll insert some pictures where you can see maybe like the variegation better. So I knit this with like a soft pink color of Nutidin, and the mohair was a variegated like pink, purple, blue, green colorway. I'm actually just realizing this in the moment, but I like variegated yarns when they are toned down. Like that same thing with my cloud sweater. I liked it because the variegated yarn was heavily toned down. And just like the combination of Nutidin and one strand of silk mohair has quickly become a favorite for me because it makes such a lightweight and airy fabric that's still very warm. There is definitely a prickle factor. If you are somebody who is sensitive to non-superwash yarns, you probably will not enjoy this yarn combination. Also, like the fluff is so nice, but it is not prone to pilling at all. Like I've worn this sweater so many times since I finished it like on the 1st of this year, and I think I've worn it at least like once or twice a week since then, and there's absolutely no pilling anywhere. The silk mohair that I want to use, so the La Bien-Aimée silk mohair is quite pricey, as La Bien-Aimée definitely is like a luxury hand-dyed yarn company. However, this is my girl math. Got this skein at my local yarn, one of my local yarn stores, and it was $40 a skein. However, usually when I'm buying La Bien-Aimée in person, it's because, like, I'll be honest, it's a little bit of an impulse buy. This skein of yarn was definitely an impulse buy. But what I try to do the few times that I have made sweaters with their yarn is I will wait until La Bien-Aimée themselves have a free shipping promotion, because when you buy directly from their site, their prices as is are a little bit cheaper than they are at US yarn stores. And number two, you do not have to pay the value added tax, the VAT. And third, because the American dollar is pretty strong in comparison to the euro right now, you get a pretty good deal. So I bought this skein of yarn for $40, and then on the La Bien-Aimée, in comparison, it is $33 for a skein depending on the exchange rate. And I also forgot to mention that this silk mohair has a higher yardage in comparison to other brands. It has 550 yards versus I think most other mohairs are around 430 yards. So for most sweater projects, unless I'm doing like something heavily cabled or just has like a lot of stuff going on, I could get away with 2 skeins. So ergo, I could get 110 yards of silk mohair for $66, assuming I'm shopping when they have a free international shipping promotion, versus if I got 5 balls of a commercially dyed mohair for the same yardage, because most of the commercially dyed mohairs come in 25 gram balls, so I would need 5 balls, and they usually cost me anywhere from like $12 to $17 a ball at my local yarn stores. So that would be anywhere from like $60 to $80 at my local yarn stores. So technically, La Bien-Aimée is relatively affordable on that scale. I don't know the point of that, point of that is I should buy this luxury yarn because it is technically an affordable luxury. Not affordable, it is relatively affordable in comparison to what else I have available to me. I don't think I've actually ever knit a garment or any project with this silk mohair, so I don't know how I will feel about it once it's knit up, but I've enjoyed all the other La Bien Aimée yarns that I've tried, so I'm pretty sure I will like this silk mohair too. And in general, I like every single silk mohair that I've tried. I think the only one I don't enjoy is the drops one because that one is just so scratchy and itchy. Okay, I think it is time to wrap things up because my camera keeps giving me overheating warnings. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you fancy, feel free to follow along and give the video a thumbs up. I'd also love to know what you're working on. Are we working on any of the same projects? Do you have thoughts on the yarn that I'm using? Do you have like recommendations like, oh, if you like this, you might like this? Feel free to let me know. I'm gonna have to do so much cutting out of all this random stuff I say. So I'm just gonna cut myself off now. Bye.